The day after my 38th birthday, I was diagnosed with a craniopharyngioma brain tumor, and I was going to have brain surgery. This is part 3 of that story. And I'm not a medical professional. This is just my story and how I remember it. When my alarm went off at 4 a.m., I was already awake. I didn't sleep at all that night. I was anxious to get out of bed and get this show on the road. I took another weird antiseptic shower, like the pre-surgery instructions said, and then Eric and I got ready to go. The kids were still asleep, so we didn't disturb them. My mom was there to stay with them, so I gave her a million hugs, told her I loved her, and then we were out the door and on our way to the Neuroscience Institute. When we got there, they told us we weren't allowed to check in for another hour. So we sat around in the hospital lobby and watched as the day began. After a little bit, my sister Christy showed up. She was there to offer support and also to hang out with Eric while I was in surgery. While we were waiting, we saw my neurosurgeon. He stopped at the coffee bar and got coffee and maybe even a donut. Brain surgeons are people just like the rest of us, so it totally made sense that he might start out his day with some coffee and maybe a donut. Not too long after, I was told to go down the hallway and up the ramp, and there I would find a white phone, and I should pick it up and tell whoever answered it my name and let him know I was there. I didn't need to push any buttons or dial any numbers. All I needed to do was pick it up and they'd know I was calling. When they came to get me, I was only allowed to take one person back with me, so Eric came with me. And the first thing they had me do was pee in a cup. I was like, why do I need to pee in the cup? And they're like, we need to make sure you're not pregnant. Being pregnant was not on my radar, and it turned out I wasn't pregnant after all. Then I was told to put on the hospital gown. That was the last time in many, many days that I felt the cozy embrace of underpants. And right away they took more blood and told me to put on this funny cap. I immediately asked, why do I need to wear a cap if I'm having brain surgery? They said it was hospital policy, and everybody needed to wear one. So just put it on. And so I did. Eventually, all of the activities started to slow down, so Eric and I started to joke around a little bit and even laugh a couple of times. And we were having the epitome of pre-brain surgery fun and games when all of a sudden, all of the lights turned off, and it was completely dark. They were only out for a split second, but it was long enough to really freak me out. Turns out that Thursday mornings, they test the backup generators, and that everything was fine. At least, that's what they told me. And I had to believe them. I had no other choice. Eric stepped out, so Christy came and sat with me. She'd only been there a minute when all the activities started up again, and they were getting ready to move me somewhere else. So she and Eric did a quick switcheroo, giving me just enough time to tell Eric how much I loved him and that I'd see him on the flip side. They wheeled me onto the elevator, and we went down to the basement. I didn't like the idea of having surgery in the basement at all. Is the basement better or worse than the garage? But the trip down there was long and very quiet. I started to get scared, and just as I was about to start crying, I was wheeled into what I can only describe as a pre-surgery holding cell, with a bunch of other patients just laying around waiting for their surgeries to start. At some point, a nurse came over with a Sharpie marker and put a big X on the side of my head. What was that for? It was an indicator for the neurosurgeon to tell him which side of my head to cut open. So I laughed, and I asked him to also put a not this hand and a not this foot mark, just in case he decided to get a little crazy and cut open some other things. But they didn't do it. And right about then, the anesthesiologist came by. He was really nice. He smiled a lot, and maybe he started an IV or something. I'm not really sure. I can't remember. And then there was more waiting. It was interesting to watch the nurses and all the other staff do everything they needed to do to get us ready for surgery. And I don't know if nurses have coffee and donuts like neurosurgeons do, but I do know they sometimes are late for work because they get stuck in traffic. All of a sudden, the activity picked up again, and the patients were being wheeled out one by one. I couldn't help but feel like we were the graduating class of May 17th, 2012. I was the last one to go, and I thought it was a little weird that the person that was taking me to the operating room was chewing gum. That didn't seem like a good idea at all. I mean, what if that gum fell into my brains? But just before opening the door to the operating room, the person did put a mask over their mouth, protecting me from their germs, but also from any rogue gum that might try and make an escape and take up residence in my inviting brains. I was so preoccupied with what was going on with me that I hadn't really thought about what it must be like for Eric and Christy in the waiting room. and my mom and the kids at home. When I recently asked Eric about it, he said he didn't remember too much. He assumes he had a snack, and he thinks that Christy may have left and gone to work, but he can't remember for sure. And he probably read some of the magazines in the waiting room. But mostly, he just sat there and waited. My mom told us about how when she was walking the kids to school, how the crossing guard asked where Dad was because he's the one who usually took the kids to school. Our 6-year-old, without missing a beat, flat out said, "Well, my mom's getting a squishy thing taken out of her brain today, so Dad's with her." Finally, I was being wheeled into the operating room. The first thing I noticed were all of the giant TVs with the MRI images all over them, and the big giant light, kind of like on TV. Then the gum-chewing bed pusher pointed out the guy in the corner who was organizing all of the equipment and tools they'd need for the surgery, and that person responded by waving and saying hello. They pushed the bed I was in right up against the operating room bed. They told me to change beds. I was like, "Wait, what?" And they're like, "Get into that other bed." I was like, "Are you kidding me? I'm about to have brain surgery and you want me to shimmy myself on over into that other bed?" And they're like, "Yes." So I did it. It was super weird, but then again, so was everything else that day. Once I was in that bed, things started moving very quickly. The anesthesiologist came over, and I was happy to see him. He went right to work injecting stuff, and he put the little mask over my face. And he told me to just breathe normal. I remember thinking, wow, this mask is really soft and squishy. And it doesn't smell or taste like oranges or bubblegum or anything. The very last thing I remember thinking was, yeah, I can feel that starting to work.